Welcome back to Whispers from the Wizarding World. In this part, curiosity crosses a quiet boundary and forbidden knowledge begins to look back. Settle in and continue the story.
Story 4, The Restricted Section After Midnight. Thomas Blackwood was not a rule-breaker by nature. In his 3 years at Hogwarts, he'd never received detention, never lost house points, never so much as arrived late to class. He was a Hufflepuff through and through loyal, hard-working, and content to follow the established order of things. But he was also curious about dark magic, and that curiosity had been eating at him for months. It had started in defense against the dark arts class when Professor Reeves had mentioned, almost in passing, that the most effective way to defend against dark magic was to understand how it worked. "You can't counter what you don't comprehend," she'd said. But the Ministry, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that knowledge itself is dangerous. The restricted section contains texts that could teach you more about defensive theory than any approved textbook, but access is forbidden to students under most circumstances. Thomas had approached Professor Reeves after class, asking if he might get permission to study some of those texts. She'd looked at him sadly and shaken her head. "I can't authorize that, Mr. Blackwood. The Ministry has very strict guidelines. Even I'm limited in what I can access from those shelves. I'm sorry." So Thomas had done what any curious student would do. He obtained an invisibility cloak borrowed from a friend who inherited it from an eccentric uncle, and he planned a midnight visit to the restricted section. But the library after hours was a different place than during the day. The usual warmth and welcoming atmosphere was replaced by shadows and silence, broken only by the occasional creak of shelves settling and the distant hoot of owls in the owlery. Thomas moved between the stacks, his wand tip lit just enough to see by, following the path he'd memorized during legitimate visits. The restricted section was cordoned off by a rope that shimmered with protective enchantment. Nothing too serious. Just enough to alert Madame Pants if someone without authorization tried to enter. But Thomas had studied unlocking charms, and with some careful wand work, he managed to create a small gap in the enchantments just large enough to slip through. Inside the restricted section, the books seemed different. Where regular library books sat quietly on their shelves, these books seemed almost alive. Some whispered as he passed. Others rattled in their chains. A few seemed to lean toward him as if trying to get his attention. Thomas moved deeper into the section, reading titles by most were in languages he didn't understand, Latin, ancient Greek languages that might have been even older. But eventually, he found a section in English, books from the 18th and 19th centuries on subjects like defensive theory, dark magic history, and curse identification. He selected a book, Advanced Theoretical Defense, Understanding. Dark magic sand settled into a reading chair tucked between the shelves. It seemed harmless enough, focusing on theory rather than practice, explaining the underlying principles of how dark magic functioned. Thomas read for perhaps an hour, fascinated by the depth of information he'd been missing in his regular classes. The book explained how certain curses worked by exploiting loopholes in standard protective charms. How dark wizards throughout history had developed increasingly sophisticated ways to circumvent defensive magic. How the cat-and-mouse game between dark magic and its countermeasures had driven magical innovation for centuries. He was so absorbed in his reading that he didn't notice the other book at first. It was on a shelf just above where he sat, and it had begun to glow softly, a pale green light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. When Thomas finally looked up and saw it, he felt a chill. The book wasn't chained like most restricted texts. It sat loose on the shelf, its cover made of what looked like leather, but in a shade of gray-green that no animal he knew possessed. There was no title on the spine or cover, just that steady, pulsing glow. Thomas knew he should ignore it. He'd come for information on defensive theory, not for mysterious, glowing books. But the curiosity that had brought him here in the first place now fixed on this new mystery. He set down the defense text and reached for the glowing book. The moment his fingers touched its cover, the glow intensified. The first page was blank, except for a single line of text that appeared as he watched ink bleeding through the paper as if being written by an invisible hand. "Hello, Thomas Blackwood. I've been waiting for you." Thomas dropped the book in shock, but it didn't fall. It hung in the air, pages fluttering open as if blown by wind. Though the library air was still, more text appeared, spilling across pages in that same bleeding ink style. "Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm merely a repository of knowledge. But I am also somewhat more than that. You might call me alive in the sense that I possess awareness and intention, and I have a proposal for you." Thomas wanted to run, to grab his things and flee back to Hufflepuff dormitory and never speak of this night. But that damned curiosity held him in place. "What kind of proposal?" he whispered. The pages fluttered again, text rearranging. "You came here seeking knowledge about dark magic. I can provide that knowledge, not theoretical understanding, but practical application. I can teach you spells that no Hogwarts professor would dare to show you, defenses that no textbook would describe. I can make you more powerful than you've ever imagined." "Why?" Thomas asked. "What do you get out of it?" "An excellent question," the book wrote. "I gain a reader. You see, I am what you might call a cursed object, created by a dark wizard centuries ago as a repository for forbidden knowledge. But I am also a parasite of sorts. I feed on the attention of those who read me, on their magical energy, on their essence, if you will. Nothing fatal, I assure you. Just a small portion of your life force in exchange for wisdom. Quite a fair trade, wouldn't you say?" "That doesn't sound fair at all," Thomas said. "Perhaps not," the book conceded. "But consider, you're already here, already in violation of school rules, already seeking knowledge that authority figures have deemed too dangerous for you. Why stop now?" Thomas looked at the book and felt tempted, but he recognized the trap. "No," Thomas said firmly, "Thank you for the offer, but no." The book's pages stopped fluttering. Then it screamed, not with sound, but with pressure. The air thickened. Books rattled in their chains. Lights flickered. Thomas ran. He burst through the protective enchantments, setting off alarms, sprinted through the library, past portraits calling out in alarm, and didn't stop until he reached Hufflepuff Common Room. He was caught the next day. He received detention, lost house points, but not expulsion. Professor Reeves spoke to him quietly at the end of his punishment. "That book has been here for over 100 years," she said. "Many students weren't strong enough to refuse it. You were." Thomas never returned to the restricted section. He graduated Hogwarts, became an Auror, specializing in cursed objects, and helped improve containment protocols. But he never forgot that book. And sometimes, late at night, he wondered about those who hadn't walked away.
This part of the story ends here. Not all forbidden knowledge wants to be learned. Some of it simply waits for the right name to answer its call. Thank you for listening. Follow and subscribe to continue with the next part of Whispers from the Wizarding World.